So I know that in the clips that you guys have seen beforehand was that triangle about adverse childhood experiences and kind of how that can lead to possible early death of by 20 years or more for an individual who grows up in an abusive home or is subjected to violence or neglect from an early age. So all of that sounded, pretty, it was easy to understand, but also it's like, yeah, okay. So I wanted to take a minute to show you an actual PET scan of an individual who grew up in an optimal environment, which is on the left, which is the brain scan that you can see that's very lit up, versus the one on the right, which is the PET scan of an individual who's experienced abuse and neglect. PET scans are a type of brain scan that literally measure activity. And so think of it like when you're looking at a radar screen of like when a thunderstorm is coming, the red means the thunderstorm's going to be really, really bad because it's like really, really intense. That's what this scan means, is that the healthy brain is has lots of communication. Almost all of the brain is lit up. Lots of the brain is lit up with that very intense neural connectivity. Whereas you see in the abused brain, it's less connected, much more inactive, let's say. So when we look at this picture and we think about the pyramid and what we just kind of went through with a child growing up in that abusive and violent environment, where one caregiver is objectively lethal and the other one is just trying to survive just as the child is, this is the impact that we see in medical documentation of that. So why is this important? So the two brains in each scan are literally the same organs. It's not like they're missing pieces or there's holes in one brain and there's not holes in another. It literally just shows you how well the brain can communicate with itself. So in order to regulate thoughts, regulate your feelings, you need to have your frontal lobes, which on the brain scan are at the top of the picture. In the healthy brain, it's nice and red, which means it's very active, whereas in the abused brain, it's much less active. Why is that important? So in order for us to regulate our emotions and to plan and concentrate, we really need that frontal lobe, the prefrontal cortex and frontal lobes, not only to be what we would call online, but they need to be able to communicate with the rest of the brain. And so that's the big difference you can see between the healthy brain and the abused brain. The abused brain, it's like the frontal lobes are kind of isolated by themselves and there's very little communication with the rest of the brain. Whereas with the healthy brain, all parts of the brain are communicating. What that means is that for that kid who feels like he's unable to relate to peers and unable to relate to the world and maybe is aggressive and very concerned with surviving the moment, the reason is because all of us have that stress response. All of us get triggered into fight, flight, freeze. The way we walk ourselves down from fight, flight, freeze is the frontal lobes. The frontal lobes will interact with the rest of our brain and say, scan the environment and be like, okay, so is there really a tire here? Or am I just did I just kind of like freak myself out a little bit? But an individual who's experienced abuse, experienced trauma, especially from a young age, when that frontal lobe can't connect with the lower part of the brain to help mediate and regulate that stress response, you get somebody who will just go into fight, flight, freeze pretty quickly because they have no ability or organization within their brain to allow their brain to reason with them, like reason with themselves, which is also why you also see kids with their inability to kind of incorporate themselves into school is because our frontal lobes, or the prefrontal cortex, is also responsible for concentration and planning and all that stuff. And so when you look at these two brain scans, it becomes visually very apparent as to why a child who's experienced abuse would struggle at school. The frontal lobes don't really communicate with the rest of the brain. The most active part of the brain is the brainstem, which is at the bottom of the screen by back. And that brainstem, again, is only there for regulatory functions, and it doesn't require any thought process on our part. We automatically blink, we automatically swallow, we automatically digest, and that's what that brainstem does. That brainstem just makes sure you live to see the next day. So again, just to kind of keep repeating, this is why when we talk about Domestic Violence Awareness Month, we want to go over what is domestic violence? What is the impact on a child? What can we do to help that child? And that's where that Safe from the Start program comes in, is that your brain develops fastest and most rapidly early in life. So if we can catch a child and provide them treatment and provide them the safety to engage in relationships and engage in curiosity and play, which is how our brains develop from a young age, we are giving the child an opportunity to develop a more healthy brain that communicates with itself, that is, activated all over the place, versus that abused brain, which really is disconnected and lots of parts of it are offline. So we encourage you guys to ask any questions, reach out to us, use this as a resource, because this is what all of our therapists here at CAC understand. And with this understanding, we can help a child develop the skills that maybe were not offered or not allowed to flourish when they were in the abusive environment that they were born into. So please use this as a resource and ask any questions, because that's what we're here for. We want to make sure that the public understands the impact of a child growing up in an environment that is dangerous.